Plants, the green frontier. These are the discussions of the podcast Horticult. Its continuing mission to talk about strange new cultivars, to seek out new flowers and plant them, to boldly garden like no one has before. Hey, this is Blaine for the Horticult. What's happening, everybody? How y'all doing? On this episode of the podcast, we have me and Brad sit down and talk about proper tree pruning techniques. And we talk about having a main leader, the 3Ds of pruning, thinning out branches and how to choose them, renewal pruning, root canopy balance, what is included bark, and habit structure. All right, well, let's get it on.
When the light is blinking.
Is that a Def Leppard song?
That's a sign of the times. Pyromania.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So this is B-Flame.
And this is B-Rad.
And we are the Horticult. Thanks for coming along for the ride.
All right, podlings.
On this episode of the podcast, we're going to talk about tree work or arboristness. Arborist stuff.
Yeah.
What you have down. Just pruning trees, tree work.
Yeah.
In general. What to look for, what not to look for. What am I not looking for?
Yeah. Now, are you talking about selecting a tree or just simply pruning a tree?
Pruning, more pruning.
Yeah.
If you have questions, say your branches are getting into the electrical stuff, what do you do? Maybe you've had a tree break. What do you do? Maybe it's getting too crowded. What do you do? Or if you have tree branch structure that you want a healthy structure in your branching, what do you do to make it healthy? What ones do you take out? What do you look for? Just stuff like that.
What's the first thing that we should all be, as novices, right?
Mm-hmm, sure.
Novice arborists. What should we be looking for to prune?
When I look at a tree, I think about a main leader. Okay, does it have a structure that I'm looking for? So what I mean by a main leader is one specific branch or trunkage that goes straight up through that everything comes off of.
Okay.
Because with a lot of varieties of trees that we use in the landscape, there's multiple leaders. And when you have a small tree, that's when you get in there and you want to remove them as soon as possible.
So the laterals that are trying to be
push
the dominance.
Yeah,
okay.
Dominance. That's a great way to say it. So by eliminating those out, then you have a better structure. Because what's going to happen is when they're having it's a better weight distribution when you have a main leader. I mean, it just makes sense because those are going to get wider. The balance of the weight is just not as good. So one of the things also is the crotches.
Well, branch union is another way to put that, yeah.
So where the branch meets
the trunk. Okay.
Or I guess it would be any branch where they meet. Is technically there's more than one crotch.
Yeah.
It's just where they meet.
Yeah.
But where specifically though what we're talking about is where a branch meets the trunk.
Okay.
Or the main leader. Because that is a very important junction, union. I was told, or this is how I think about it, the more upright or parallel those two are, the worse or the not as solid junction there is connection in that union.
So like if it's a close angle, right?
Yeah. So if they're growing really narrowly together.
Okay.
So you want a more perpendicular.
Okay.
More of a 90 degree. Like if you look at a pine tree.
Okay.
Those are 90 degree branches out of, and those are super, super strong unions. But if you look at more of like
Zelkova.
A Zelkova is a great example.
Yeah.
Because they're very upright and all the branching are up together, and those unions are very weak.
Yeah.
And one of the downfalls to a Zelkova is that there's a lot of breaking during storms. because those unions aren't very good. There's something called
or included.
Yeah. Basically, I think of it kind of like a tectonic plate kind of subduction. So here you have one plate and it goes under another and curls. And so what happens is the bark prevents the union to happen. So there's actually bark inside the tree.
Yeah. And it doesn't allow for those cells to be strengthened.
Right. Because it's a physical barrier between the union to have a solid grip.
So by pruning correctly and thinking about the leader and these lateral branches, creating a good scaffolding.
To me, it's like preventive maintenance, because what's going to happen, that tree branch is going to stay at that union. It's not going to go up the tree, right?
Right.
As the tree grows, at a certain point, there's first growth and secondary growth. So first growth is when it's a green and it's growing longer. Secondary growth is going wider. So after the initial growing of a new branch, it doesn't do the initial growth anymore. It just gets wider.
Secondary. Okay.
Just a secondary. So it creates those rings and whatnot. And only the very tips of the branches are doing
the active primary growth.
Growth.
Yeah. Cool.
So if you think about that when you're pruning too, you could kind of foresee problems.
Which brings me to the 3Ds.
The 3Ds.
Yeah, explain the 3Ds. So this is, and we're talking not novice level here. We'll start talking about maybe altering branch unions or crotch angles. That's for the intermediate and advanced version arborist or enthusiast. But the 3Ds, that is absolutely for everybody out there, right?
Right, totally. And these are applicable to also shrubs. So if you're working on shrubs, you could use the 3Ds, and it helps out a lot. The 3Ds goes as follows, in any particular order, but dead, diseased, and damaged, or you could say deformed also. So if it's just a funky looking, so we're talking like how things are rubbing.
So if there's two branches rubbing because the wind damaged, is like,
right.
Yeah.
So that is a branch where you can remove that branch. You can pick which one to remove.
Okay.
And whatever one fits the structure better. Usually I like to pick ones that are not coming back into the tree. You want to have it go out of the tree.
Okay.
So that's important.
Makes sense. There's more light outside of the tree canopy, so that's...
And then dead is easy to tell. It's dead.
Yeah.
So those ones are easy to remove. The tree has already picked that for you to remove. You just have to go do it to make it look better.
Yeah.
The tree's not using it. It's just dead space. Dead.
Would that bring up any red flags? I mean, if you saw dead branches, are there other things that you can ask yourself, other questions you can say, well, why is that dead?
Yeah. Some trees will just die back, like maples. A lot of maples they'll just cut that branch off. Usually it's not a huge branch. I would say the more there is and the larger sections or the bigger branches that are dying back, that's when you kind of have to worry.
Okay. Otherwise, expect the normalcy of a tree if a branch is shaded too much, maybe.
Yeah.
It says, hey, we're not going to spend any more energy on these leaves. We can't photosynthesize and make it worth it. So we're going to retract the energy. We're going to cut off the vascular system, and we're going to send that nutrients and energy out to the outer canopy. So, yeah, you're going to see more of that.
Well, I've kind of seen dieback on older trees. So maybe they do need a pruning. So by pruning it, you're making it so it doesn't need to die back. You're choosing it over the tree choosing it, kind of a deal.
Okay.
But if you prune it, like you're just saying, it's reserving that energy for new growth. So then that could be an issue that I've noticed that with some maples that are in my parents' yard or in my grandma's yard. They're dying back because they've never been pruned.
Mm-hmm. So they're super, super thick.
Right.
Too much competition.
And they're only going to get so big. I mean, that's why if you look up, this is how big it says it will be at a mature it's not just going to keep getting bigger because it can't doesn't have enough energy distribution to just keep it bigger. And then to make it more vigorous, to make it grow a little bit, maybe better leaves or prone to disease and insects, by pruning it back, it has more energy to fight those off.
Fresh new solar panels.
Exactly.
I like it.
Well, I just pruned maybe 2-3 years ago. I pruned my grandma's mock orange. It was looking garbage. It was overgrown. It was so gross. The branching just wasn't good. It was still blooming, but a little bit. I pruned it freaking hard last year. I pruned it hard the year before. So I'm taking out those bigger canes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Man, this year it is blooming super, super profuse. I
cool.
can't believe how much is blooming. And my wife was like, I've never seen that thing bloom like that
That's
before.
so cool. So the name of that type of pruning for that mock orange, renewal pruning.
Yes. Yep.
And that's something
it's different
you do.
from trees.
Yeah.
So
that's more of a shrubby thing, right?
Yeah. So you're basically making it young again.
Mm-hmm.
So you're taking out all the old stuff.
Can they do that to us humans?
I wish.
Making us young again. Here, cut off my arm.
Yeah.
I don't care.
No. It's like what is that show? Deadpool, when he has a little baby arm. He grows back a little baby arm, and he's touching the lady. You better not be touching me with your little baby arm. So nasty. So yeah, that would be us.
So renewal pruning.
Different. So it's a little it's kind of
the sub.
It's kind of after you do the 3Ds,
Mm-hmm.
you would do a renewal
Okay.
pruning on shrubs.
Would you ever do a renewal on trees?
It depends. Okay, you're looking at fruit trees, you prune them different.
Yeah.
You don't prune fruit trees the same way as you prune a maple yearly.
Very
and stuff
different,
like
yeah.
Very, very different. So I guess you could kind of say that's almost like a version of reprune, because you're
renewal, yeah.
Yeah, because you're taking it back down. You're not letting it get to a certain height. You're not letting it just mature. You're basically keeping it young all the time.
Yeah. I mean, essentially you're just keeping it really as low as you can for the ease of picking.
Right.
And reinvigorate it every year. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Milioki. She talked about how it's almost dwarfing.
Yeah.
By pruning it that way, you're almost dwarfing a fruit tree.
Yeah.
Which that's not what you want for a shade tree.
No, different.
And then different fruit trees require different kind of pruning. So you have to study up on your apple versus cherry versus peach.
Yeah. So fruit pruning, there's renewal pruning, a few other types of pruning if we want to kind of dive into that.
Directional pruning,
so maybe away from the house.
Right.
From power lines.
Yep, power lines. So that's when you go down the street and you see these crews from the city or whatever, these electrical people pruning these trees in a weird shape. They're just gutting a tree basically to get away from the power lines. That is called directional pruning, and that is someone put that tree in the wrong spot. Or when they put the power lines in, it was a little itty bitty tree and they grew into the power lines.
Yeah.
So they need to keep them away from the power lines for safety purposes.
Yeah.
So
eventually that tree will probably be removed.
Eventually, yeah. They would have to be eventually. That's why certain trees are good for street trees and certain trees are not. So they stay at a certain height.
Real quick, I'm just thinking.
Back to the crotch.
Well, no, I'm thinking about safety and power lines. And by all means, before you go out there with a pair of pruners or saw, pay attention to look above the tree and around the tree. And if it's a big tree, make sure there's no power lines running through this, because power lines can energize branches, and you don't actually have to touch the power line with your pole pruning saw to get electrocuted. So that electricity will jump through the branch. And so really, if you do see that, you'll want to have the city or the power company. So whoever, for us, it's Rocky Mountain Power. And they actually
charge you?
They'll
come out and take care of it for free?
Yeah, if there is a power line touching your tree, they have to come out and take care of that. Now, by saying that, I believe it's required of them to remove the branches only up to 10 feet away from the power line. So that's not very much.
Mm-mm. But after that, you could cut it out.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not touching it anymore.
You can. Now, there's also some rules as far as being a certified arborist that if the branch is within 10 feet of the power line, then
you need to be a certified arborist.
That's exactly right. Yeah. You don't want to even mess with that. I mean, it's your life, right?
But that's good to know that they are required to come out and prune it that required length.
Yeah.
Away. I was talking to a neighbor about it, and I didn't know. I was like, well, I know an arborist has to come out if it's touching the power lines, but then there's like the phone and the internet that are hanging up there too. So I'm not exactly sure. I mean,
I
that's
don't
low
think
power.
those count. I don't think phone and internet count.
Yeah, because they're not going to kill you.
Nope.
Low voltage stuff.
So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. Also, if you're planting your landscape, just be aware of that. How big's your tree going to get, and are there any power lines anywhere near? Like, don't be like, that's going to be 20 years from now. I'll be long gone. You know, that's just not very responsible. But anyway.
Well, see, me in a new neighborhood, everything's under the ground.
Yep.
So that's the other aspect, I guess. If I want to plant a tree, I have to like double check with the power company and have them come out and. Blue Stakes, I think, is through who does Utah.
Yeah.
And they do it for free. It's just you're on a waiting list or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. So good. That's a good point. Okay, so I've got just a quick list of
it's you, bro.
different types of pruning and thinning. So thinning would be that kind of like take out the dead and diseased and damaged. But also if you want to kind of open up the interior a little bit, not a lot, but just a little bit to maybe reduce weight. One thing you want to be careful of when you are thinning the interior is not to lion tell. It's called lion telling. It's kind of a funny word. As far as like leaving all of the little micro branches on the tips. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to go in there and say, oh yeah, I'm going to thin this thing out.
So there's a technique of doing that, right?
Yeah.
It's called pollarding. Isn't that what you're talking about?
No, that would be, so pollarding would be a little bit different. So
what's the difference between lion tail and pollarding?
So lion telling, it would be, let's just take a large tree and you remove all of the little micro branches along the main trunks.
See. I guess
so
what
then,
you're saying.
And let's just say, for example, you can't reach the tip, the canopy. So you end up leaving all of the weight on the very, very, very tip of the canopy.
Okay, gotcha.
And you're like, oh, I did a good job. I cleaned out the inside. I thinned it, right?
Yeah.
But that will actually cause some big time problems in the future because all the weight is on the exterior and it can't balance that weight or counterbalance that weight in a windstorm. So thinning is removing some interior branches, but trying to avoid the lion telling effect. And if you can picture like the lion tail, like obviously the tuft at the end.
I get you.
Yeah. Okay, so thinning. Another one would be crown reduction. They call it crown reduction, and that's basically reducing the canopy without topping it. So here's another one of those. Like you can benefit your tree by reducing some branches on the exterior and the canopy, the outer layer, but you want to be careful that when you do make a prune cut, that the diameter of the branch that you are cutting is only a third of the remaining branch, the third of the diameter of the remaining branch. Does that kind of...
Yes.
Yeah. So you're not doing blunt cuts. Blunt cut would be topping a tree.
Yeah, which I think everyone's seen that.
Yeah, and that was more common back in, I want to say, 70s, 80s type pruning, and who knows before that. But I know just simply getting certified with arborist folks, that was something that was just like no company, legitimate company out there that's certified will ever, they will not top a tree, even if the homeowner's like, I will pay you double. They just won't do it.
Right.
It's just not ethical. So
that was one thing in my arborist class they talked about was pruning a tree, but having people not know it was pruned. Like it's supposed to look, you've thinned it out, you've reduced the canopy, but it still looks like a tree. And I think we went with Foursquare one time, right? And we did all those pairs where we're pruning all this stuff. We filled the truck up.
Oh, yeah.
Like, or the trailer. We filled up all we had like 6 of them that we were pruning. Well, you guys were pruning it. I was just moving the branches. But I'm not bitter. That's okay. But
sorry, man.
We filled it so much, and you could not even tell.
Yeah.
Those trees.
That's a good prune job.
That's a healthy pruning.
Yeah.
When there's still leaves on the tree.
Yeah.
And it has that same shape that it had before. You've just thinned it out. You've lightened its load, its burden that it had. That is the proper way to prune. If you're cutting it all the way down, it's just nubs. You're starving that tree. You're pushing that tree to like absolute brink.
Yes, and I'm glad that you mentioned nubs, because that is
nubbins.
The nubbins. That's the pollarding.
Yeah, that's the technical term is nubbins.
Yeah.
No, it's a French thing, pollarding.
Okay, so pollarding, and you'll see this with catalpas, right?
Right.
And so Morinda, we've got a great story about Morinda and pollarding those trees out in the front.
Yeah.
Catalpas can handle that type of abuse and actually do quite well.
They have that weird weak wood, or it has that little soft in the middle. You know what I'm talking about? Catalpas? I forget what it's called.
Balsa wood. Oh, no, just kidding.
What is it?
Is it the pith? Is it the pith? Okay,
yes.
Yeah.
So that's a unique thing for catalpas, that they can grow fast, and they have those huge leaves, and that's kind of what those trees, there's like a separate breeding of them that was specifically for that kind of pruning.
Mm-hmm. Would you say, like, okay, so you blunt cut... You blunt cut those, and it's almost like water sprouts in mass.
Yes.
To the point where it creates these balls.
They look like Dr. Seuss trees.
Okay.
Where it's like
trunk
balloon of just evenly spaced length branching, because they all grew at the same time. They all started at the same time. So they make these little like balloon.
It's all and they're I mean, I'm guessing it's just kind of this calloused wood that has grown, and then those water sprouts come back every year. Now, by saying that is a lot of work.
Yeah.
If you don't keep up yearly on that pruning, pollarding, then the tree will eventually fall apart and split apart and get diseased.
It doesn't have any sort of base. You're draining it of its nutrients every time. Catalpas, I think there's other trees that can handle it. Like I've seen mulberries, because they have a really quick growing. I've seen a lot that have been nubbed, like certain vigorous, what is it, the Siberian elm. I've seen it. They didn't, it's just grown back really fast. And they can handle it because it's...
Maybe it was an unintentional pollard. Right. It was just like,
it wasn't really truly pollard. It was like,
and that's sometimes that's the result of topping. You top an
topping,
elm.
It was more topped.
Yep. Yeah. And then you're going to get that funky kind of like lion telling. Like
it's an old school kind of... I guess there's a proper way to do it and an improper way to do it. So we actually did it at the U with some shrubs. We wanted them to do that kind of straight up water sprouting instead of its regular kind of...
The lateral branch.
Yeah. We wanted it to be this straight thing. So that's what we did. And they're so gorgeous when they do it. But it had a pith in it too. So it was the same kind of branching. We actually did it with smoke bush.
Oh, yeah.
And it was so
cool. Very pithy.
Very
pithy. It's pithious.
So that was a really cool
That
effect.
is very cool, yeah.
That you could do with those. But we didn't do it every year. We did it like every 3 years.
Okay.
With those. So I was only there for the first year, so I didn't get to go through everything.
But you got to see it, and that's way cool.
And it totally works. It's easier to do to shrubs, I think, than it is to cut them. I mean, we cut that thing all the way to the ground.
Yeah.
But we didn't. We made it. We just cut all the branches down to the main stump or whatever. We didn't cut it all. Just make one stump.
What was that variety?
Of smoke bush.
Smoke bush. Okay, yeah.
I don't remember the variety.
Kind of a smaller tree, kind of a multi-stem tree.
It could be like a tree or a bush. And these ones were down to the ground, So that was more of the bush
Yeah.
shrub variety.
Dude, the genus Cotinus cogigria.
That's so cool.
Genus species Cotinus cogigria.
Look that one up, ladies and gents.
Yeah. Okay, so real quick, do we have a second?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's really, in my mind, there's two more styles and types of just pruning. And there's the obvious, right? Removal. And what does that mean? It means you're getting rid of that tree. Climb up that sucker, chop it down, zip, 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 chainsaw it, stump grind it. I don't care. And that's removal. Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's the final one in my mind, and I only know this because of Mirinda originally, Milwaukee, the Milwaukee style pruning, which is an old school Japanese style pruning, usually on conifer style type plants, but I think it could be done in any way, and it's a lot like topiary. I mean, you've seen different topiary type shrubs and things like that, but
I've seen Edward Scissorhands.
yeah, it's a lot. It's very much so like that. And so in my own backyard, I've taken 2 junipers, and I've taken it to this level, this Milwaukee style. So, and one of those is a Rocky Mountain juniper. So this tree has the potential, the genetics to get massive, super, super big, super tall. And basically at a very young age, and I'm talking about 2 feet tall, I pinched the top off. And it's all lateral, right? And so, and I've intentionally, at that size, now we're coming full circle here, it's not lion telling, but I removed all of the needles and branches, the micro needles, from the interior and on the lateral branches. It's all super symmetrical. And at the very end, there's this little pom-pom. And about 2 to 3 times a year, I have to go in and trim the new growth, back to its original, like, pom-pom size. So I want to say the size of your fist, or about the size of those balls on the outside. Now, it gives a really cool architectural kind of like look to the backyard, you know, as far as it's not natural, high maintenance, but it's so small. I was able to tackle these little guys at such a small size that it's not overburdensome. Yeah, I've got 2 of those little guys. Of course, the ones at Mirinda were these giant Scotch pines. Yeah. And I'd crawl up in there, and I would just pinch every needle, kind of like Mr. Miyagi, and it was just like so cool. Mm-hmm. But it's supposed to resemble cloud formations. So like if you think about nature and like how they're kind of billowing on the top and flat on the bottom, that's what it's supposed to replicate or represent, our clouds. And so,
well, everything cool. in Japanese style is mimicking nature in some form. So that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
That's what they're trying to.
Oh, like Zen mimic. Gardens might
right. Zen garden is a different kind of
replicate, like a
the waves,
desert maybe. Waves.
Yeah, so the sand would be water, the rocks are islands, and then the moss on the rock is forest.
Oh, cool.
So it's like a micro version of nature.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So they can replicate it with other stuff.
Trees. Yeah.
So like trees could represent forests or clouds, or like and the very little color, right? So the only color really that you get is either from the maples, so like Japanese maples red,
sure. Yep.
or like seasonal changes, like in the fall colors, spring with the blooms, like the blossoms. Mm-hmm. So like that's it. There's hardly any color. It's just green. That's
some
pruning.
Cool styles and techniques of pruning, and some ideas to think about, some safety things to think about.
So do you consider a true arborist would be one who climbs a tree, or would you say it's okay to use a bucket?
Totally okay to use a bucket.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like,
100%.
Come on, climb the tree, suckers. I want to see these fat arborists climb a tree.
Yeah, I think both ways are very important. As far as
So don't make fun of the people in the buckets.
oh yeah, no.
Okay.
To me that's a really, it's kind of like a bird's eye view of the tree being on the outside of the canopy versus being on the inside.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely purists in the realm of arborists, and that's awesome. Kudos to them if they can identify what needs to be pruned from the inside. It's very difficult. There's some skill there for sure, but yeah, I'm all about the bucket lift.
All right, cool, man.
Cool.
Well, hope you enjoy this one.
Planton, Babylon.
Planton, suckers. Okay, bye.
Later.
All right, well, there we go. That was episode number 80, Proper Tree Pruning. Thank you, Podlings, for listening. We love you. Thank you, Brad, for doing this podcast with me. You're the man. If you like the Horticult, come find us on some social media. We have a Facebook group and page, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. You can always find all those links at thehorticult.com. If you really like us, give us a rating on your preferred listening podcast platform. And if you love us, then leave a review and share us with your good, close family and friends. Thank you so much. We are overwhelmed with how many people listen to us. So thank you out there. It means so much to us. It keeps us rolling every week. So thank you. Don't forget to plant on, Babylon.